Good afternoon, everybody. It's 2 minutes after 1 on the second to last Tuesday, no, the last Tuesday of the month in November. And Mary Jo and I are arguing about whether it's 101 or 102 or 103 and whether or not I should click the Start Broadcast button. So that means it's time for the virtual user group meeting that we affectionately call the Watercooler. And I can see the Christmas tree that's up in our office, although there are no gifts underneath it. But I can also see out my window where it's raining. So that means it's November, and that means it's time for our year-end summary water cooler meeting. In other words, what to do at year-end. Now, we've got a whole list of things to go through here, and a whole lot of people on the call, and a whole lot of people that couldn't make it but that registered so that they would get the link to the recorded version. So we're going to start. I'm going to talk first, and then we're going to have Mary Jo go through some of the knowledge base articles that she'll point you towards, pointing out each of the systems and what you should do at year end. And then she's going to bring me in at a couple times to talk about a couple key points, and then we'll be done. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about making what we call a historical backup. It will turn to the new year on the morning of Saturday, January 1st. And when you get into the office, either on Monday morning or just before you leave the office on, well, Friday night if you have to work on New Year's Eve, then you will be at a point in time that everybody likes to look back to. Accountants will say, well, what was this figure at year end? Or what did this GL account look like at year end? Or what was the situation in this program at year end? Now, the problem is that most accountants are very busy people at year end, so they don't say these things until February or March or sometimes April. And by that time, you've gone through one, if not 2 or 3 billing cycles, and you've closed your GL 1, if not 2 or 3 times, and it's no longer year end. We kind of decided a few years ago that it would be neat if everybody could freeze time and have a point of reference that they can go back to. And it's really not that difficult. So I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to take you into my computer, and I'm going to get you to wherever the demo data is, and I'm going to pretend that that's right here, although it may or may not be. And here we have the directory that has tabs in it. Now, if I get back to where I can see that directory, and you want to know where your tabs directory is, so you'll go into tabs or GL or AP or trust or anything, and you'll click on About Tabs 3, and you will look in here for what we call your current working directory, okay? For me, that's C:/wow. For you, it's probably something like F:/STI. You then get here to where you can see that directory, and as I said, mine was on the C drive, and it's called WOW. You right-click on it. You choose Copy. You then right-click over here in the white space, and you choose Paste, and you wait. What's going to happen is it's going to make an entire copy of absolutely everything that's in the system. Now, don't tell Ken Merkt, who's the Executive Vice President of STI, because he's real picky about licensing, and he thinks that this is having 2 working copies of the program. I don't care. It's not. This is so that later on in May, well, not May, they wouldn't do this to you in May, in March or April or in February, when the accountant says, what was the figure for the timekeeper productivity for this particular attorney at year end? You can come back to this other directory. It's going to come up as something like copy of WOW is what mine would say. Yours will say copy of STI or whatever. And you can go into that directory or folder. You can go to tabs and run the tabs3.exe or tabs.exe program, or GLS or APS or TAS or Practice Master, which happens to be called CM. We won't go there. And you can actually see everything the way it was when you made that copy. You're basically freezing time so that you can go back to this copy you made at this exact point in time and answer whatever questions anyone may have as you go through those 4 months that follow the year end. Okay? Now, you don't have to do this. You can always try and print reports in February and then backtrack and come to some conclusion as to what that figure would have been. But the easiest way to get any historical information at that frozen point in time is to simply make a copy of the software. Now, a couple things. Everybody has to be out of the software. If they aren't, you'll get an error message saying that the copy wasn't successful at some point when it runs into a file that people are in. Second point, if you have the client-server version, which is about to be renamed Platinum, you will need to not only make sure everybody's out, but you'll need to stop the two services, the two STI services. Now, if you don't know what stopping services is, you either need to talk to your network administrator or someone who's very nerdy at your firm, or you need to call us. Because I'm not going to show you how to stop services. I don't even have a network that this is running on right now that I can stop services on. But you need to be sure that those two services are stopped and that everybody's out of your software. If you're not running the CSV or the Platinum version, you don't need to worry about stopping the services. I know that's a weird, nerdy thing to say, but you do merely need to worry that everybody be out of the software. You'll know if you haven't done these two things because when you try to make your copy, it'll fail. Then later on, if you simply come into the directory, we'll pretend this says copy of WOW, and go to tabs.exe and type it right there, tabs.exe, and double-click on this, you'll be signing into Tabs. And you'll be signing into Tabs the way it was at December 31st or on January 3rd, whenever it is that you made this copy of the software. Very easy to do, will save you a lot of trouble later if and when the accountant or whoever comes back and asks for those weird figures. So with that, I'm going to close this up, and I'm going to leave Tabs up on the screen, and I am going to turn it over to Mary Jo, who's going to walk us through some of the other things that we do at year end.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm just going to add just one thing there to what Paul said. Most of you will have, your folder will probably be named STI, and it's probably going to be out on my computer, out on a drive somewhere that's on your server. It's not going to be on your C drive, the Tabs3 folder like where Paul was. There will be a folder in there that says Tabs3 that's on your local C drive, but that's not the one you want to copy. You want to make sure you're where your live data is, so it'll be out on some drive on the server, and it will be, where he said the About Tabs3. You want to make sure that you're specifically in that drive and in the right folder. And in our case, it is on the C drive, but in a server situation, that would be different. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to talk a little bit about each of the programs and some of the things that you want to do at the end of the year. Now, there's no set-in-stone list that's going to say you have to do all of these, or you need to do this report, and this report. There's going to be different reports that you may want to do for your firm that somebody else doesn't need or doesn't care about. So this is kind of an overview, and Paul is going to send you a link to the knowledge-based articles that will have all of the list of things that I'm talking about for each program. So you can go back in and you can pick and choose, and it'll have a little more information as to how to do some of these things and what they mean. But for our purposes here today, I'm going to kind of go over an overview for each program and take you through step by step some of the important features. Now, at month end, you're always doing a data file integrity check, or you should be. And we talked about that last month. Well, it's no different at the end of the year. You're definitely going to want to do your data file integrity check in Tabs, and also the archive data file integrity check. So there's two data file integrity checks there to do at year end. The other thing that you're going to want to do is on your Statements tab, you're going to want to run your pre-update statements report. You just want to make sure that you don't have any bills out there that you've prepared a final bill for, but that never got updated. And that's something you should also be doing monthly, but at the end of the year it's really important as well. You don't want any bills that are in final carrying over into the next year. So you want to just kind of make sure those are right, and if they do have final bills run, either unbill them if you didn't mean to bill them, or go ahead and update those statements. Something that you're going to want to do on top of the backup, and this is in all the programs, Paul's telling you, told you how to back up the entire STI folder, but you also are going to want to make an internal backup. And you don't have to do that in each program. If you do it once and just hit backup data files, it will back up all of the files for all the modules that you have. So you don't have to go into Tabs and go into Practice Master and go into GL and do a backup. You can just do it once, and that will take care of everything. And you'll have an internal backup as well. You are going to want to, after you've run the pre-update statements report, update any statements. You're going to want to make sure there's nothing hanging out there. You'll probably want to do an accounts receivable report. Any management and productivity reports that you use in your firm, you're going to want to make sure you run those at year end. Let's see. You will, we've talked about maintaining the year-end backup. And then you're also going to want to advance to the next year. And it's still going to be here with the advanced current reporting month, but you're going to have an option that will say, you know, to advance to the next year. And you're going to go ahead and do that. Some other things that you might want to do is print a timekeeper list that includes any timekeeper overhead amount. So if you're keeping track of overhead for each of your timekeepers, you're going to want to print that off so that you know if they've met their productivity requirements or not. And I don't know if any of you know, some of you might be using this, some may not even know it's available, but when you set up a timekeeper, and I'm just going to take Michael Larson here for instance, there is a profitability button here on the timekeeper screen. This is your freebie of the day, but you can come in and you can actually set productivity totals for each month, and then on certain reports it will tell then if they've met that productivity level. So you can come in and figure out what that would be. And I know some firms like to use hours, that they're supposed to have so many hours that they work per month and bill, but you can actually figure that down to a dollar amount and put it in here, and you can set those up for each month. So that's just something that you may want to print off, that list with the productivity totals for their overhead amounts. So that's for tabs. We're going to move over to General Ledger. And let me close this and reduce that. And Paul, we didn't have that open, did we, Paul? I'm sorry. Let me open that up here. General Ledger. For General Ledger, there's a couple other steps here. Again, with all programs, we're going to want, I'm sorry?
I'm going to interrupt you real quick because I forgot to do this up front, and I don't know if people have questions, but I'm going to show this, and I'm going to bring this down behind us. This is what you have over on the right-hand side of your screen. So if you have a question, as Mary Jo's going or as I'm going and talking, you can either raise your hand by clicking on this little hand with an arrow pointing upwards in front of it, which means raise my hand, or you can come in here and type your question. Now, if you want to get this box out of the way, this will do that, and then it will change into arrows that point to the left, and you can bring your box back and type your question, or you can raise your hand. But the point is, if you have a question, don't hesitate to either type it here or raise your hand, and we'll unmute you and ask your question. I wanted to get that out of the way, Mary Jo, before you went on, so that if people do have questions,
no problem. No problem. Okay. So for the General Ledger, again, we're always going to be running our data file integrity check in every program. You're going to want to post any reoccurring entries. If you've set up any kind of reoccurring entry in TAB or GL, you're going to want to post those before the end of the year. You're going to want to post any payroll entries if they're integrated. If you use PenSoft or an ASCII file that you're importing payroll information in, you're going to want to make sure that you post all of those before the end of the year so your journal entries are made. If you're using an accrual system, most of our clients are using cash, but we do have a couple that are out there using the accrual method of accounting. You're going to want to post those journal entries as well. You're going to want to reconcile your bank statement. So you're going to want to do that. Now, some of you may not be even getting your statement until the middle of January. Don't think you can't come in after you've done this and reconcile, but that's a year-end thing that you're going to want to make sure that you've got everything reconciled. You can print your monthly journals and your General Ledger report. If you go to the Reports tab, there's several different ones here that you're going to want to print off. Your General Ledger, trial balance, balance sheet, income statement, all of those are good ones to print, and you can also print your journal report off. You can make any journal entry changes if they're necessary, and you can always come back even after you've advanced the year, and you can, because you know you're going to get those adjusting entries from your accountant come, March, April, whenever you're doing your taxes, and you can always come back into the prior year and you can post those journal entries and then make those adjustments. But if there are anything that you know about now, you can go ahead and do that and post those. You can make any adjusting year-end journal entries if applicable, and again, like I said, you may not be getting those until afterwards. We talked about printing your trial balance, balance sheet, income statement. Those are all things that your accountant will need. And again, if you've made the copy, like Paul said, you can always get back in and get those exact figures, or you do have the ability to go back 3 years. If I'm in the trial balance, I can go back 3 years and print. So if I've already advanced to 2010, I will still be able to print, or I'm sorry, to 2011, I'll still be able to go back and print 2010. You're going to want to print selected GLS report writer reports. If you use report writer, I'm not sure how many are out there, but if you do, you'll want to print any of those reports that you're using. Those are custom reports that you can create. Let's see. We've already talked about backing up our files. You want to make sure that there's no outstanding journal entries for the prior year, so you can check that. And you're going to, we're going to talk a little bit here about archiving your GLS client. And I'm going to let Paul go in and talk about that a little bit in more detail. Paul, let me get you over there. And we got to get out of tabs. Close that. Okay.
Okay.
And Paul, if you want to talk about clients.
I would love to talk about archiving the client. When you close your year, one of the things that General Ledger does is it brings everything forward a year and drops a year off at the back end. In other words, it's only keeping journal entries for 3 years. And therefore, at that point, you're going to lose a year's worth of journal entries, which is really no big deal because they're so far back. One thing to consider is, and I'll just interject this right now, you really want to make sure that you avoid any checks that are going to drop off that are more than 2 years old or are going to be more than 2 years old that have not cleared, because once those journal entries drop off, the ability to avoid those checks disappears, and it's going to affect your reconciliation because now your calculated balance is going to be different once those unvoided, once those unreconciled checks clear off without having been voided first, voided and of course reconciled. So with this happening, a lot of people want to save a historical view of the way their journal entries that are about to drop off were. Now, as we close 2010, it is not 2010's journal entries that are going to drop off. And in fact, I think it used to be 2009's that drop off, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mary Jo, but didn't they change it a couple of years ago that now it's the 3 years ago, not last year's, that are dropping off. So correct. You're really losing, when you close 2010, you're losing 2008's journal entries. Your balances will all be correct. It's just that the journal entry detail is going away. So what a lot of people like to do, because what I described at the beginning of the water cooler meeting was really just something that you will do and then get rid of because it takes up so much space on your hard disk and it really is not an efficient use of your disk space. So you don't want to rely on this copy that you've made 2 years from now or 10 years from now or 20 years from now if you want to see a journal entry. But what you can do is you can come in here and go ahead and make a copy. Now, the way to make a copy of your GLS client for historical purposes is to come in here and find a client. And it's funny, they say client, and you think of people that you want to pay you because you've billed them. And GLS, a client, is actually you, your company. You'll notice we have a GLS client in our sample system for Jensen, Martin, and Anderson, which is the sample law firm that we deal with on a daily basis. To make a copy of the client for backup purposes, you pull up this list and look for other clients that are not used, and we don't have any. So the first thing you have to do, if you don't find any when you drop this down, is to get out of there and increase your limit. So I'm going to go from having a limit of 1 client to now a limit of 2. And once I do that, I'll drop this up, and now I will see an unused client. So I go ahead and pull that up, and I give it a name, something like 2010 archive or whatever I want to call it, and then I give it a GLS data path. Now, don't do this. Don't put in C:/Paul/whatever. Let it put this folder, this path, this directory where it wants to. Just give it a name, keep it short, 2010 archive. You can put spaces in there. am old and come from a time when we weren't allowed to have spaces in our folder names or our directory names, so I don't do that. So you just give it a name like that. Tell it these sorts of things, and it'll ask as I get out of there if I want to create that path because I don't have it.
No slash, Paul. No slash.
It put that in.
Oh, okay.
You'll want to make sure that your beginning fiscal month matches with what you've got. So most of you, that's going to be January. And when you go to save it, it'll ask if you want to copy an existing client's chart of accounts, and you'll say yes. And you'll choose this active one. And then it'll say, do you want to copy the old balances? Yep. Do you want to copy the journal entries? Yep. You probably don't need the recurring entries because you're not going to be using this. And then once you say OK, it will make a copy. And then you can always come back into GL, change your currently active client, and basically look at the books, including that detail that's going to drop off once you close a month. So just to summarize, you come into, Mary Jo got us in here. Let's see if I can remember how to get in here. You go into Setup, GLS Client. You drop down this list looking for unused, which we won't find now because I went ahead and did this. You select unused, or if you don't have one, you go into limits and increase your limits to allow you to have an unused. You go over and pull it up. You give it a name. You give it a path. You make sure the beginning fiscal month matches up with what you need. You save it using the save icon or Control-S, which is what I did because, again, I'm old and I come from an era when we didn't have mice. And it'll ask you those questions about whether or not you want to copy from an existing, yes, and that's going to be your main one, whether you want to keep the journal entries and whether you want to keep the balances, and the answer to both those questions will be a check mark to indicate that, yes, you do. And that's it. Once you've done that, if you go ahead and close your month then, close your year then, that's what this is all about, closing the year. If you go ahead and close your year then, you'll still have this historical client, if you will, historical set of books that you can go back to and look at those historical journal entries. Okay, Mary Jo?
That is something that Paul mentioned there too. It's very important to do that before you close your year. If you've already closed your year, it's too late. So you need to make sure you'd have to do it from a backup, and there's other steps you're going to have to do. So make sure that you archive the client first, and then you close your year. Okay. After you've done that, then you're going to go ahead and advance and close your current year. And then you can make any adjusting. You can always go back and make any entries that you need to there. You're going to want to reprint your financial statements after you've got into the next year so you can compare, make sure everything came over okay. One other thing that I don't know that it's on this list here, but you're also going to want to move your retained earnings into a prior year retained earnings account. So you'll have to make a manual journal entry to actually move those retained earnings out of the current retained earnings GLS account into a prior year account and get it fresh for the next year at 0. So that's a journal entry that you're going to want to make. And then if you have to edit any budget figures or anything like that for the following year, you can do that and then have that ready to go for the following year. Any questions on GL or tabs that we've covered so far?
Don't see any. We must be doing real good.
Yeah. On to AP. Same thing, what we're going to do here, let's get into AP. Again, always run your data file integrity check. You're going to want to post any checks. Make sure everything is posted. You're going to want to print the check register report. That way you can just come in and you can print this check register. Print the voided checklist. That way you know what checks are out there and have been voided. And if you need to, you ever go back there, you know what, you've got the list of them. If you want to print a vendor analysis report, you can do that. Again, we've got a whole slew of reports in here that you may or may not use, but some people like to keep track of how much they paid certain vendors throughout the year. And so you can actually do that vendor analysis report, and it will go down and break that down for you. And then there is a place that then you can clear that. You can print the paid invoices report by vendor. Again, that's another one here that you want to see what you've paid for each vendor. And like I said, after you've printed your reports, then you can actually go in and you can clear those vendor analysis totals, and you can clear them for the whole year then and start fresh for the next year so you can get the totals again. After that, you are going to probably print your 1099 forms, and Paul's going to tell you real quick about 1099. There's a little tab here to get into it, and he can tell you a little bit about 1099s.
Well, there's a report that's going to show you what's going to print. There are the actual forms, and somebody asked about this because I think they got an email or a mailing from STI about the official forms, and they didn't even know that you could do this. So yes, you can print 1099s. They were doing them manually. And you can even create a 1099 disk file that can be submitted electronically. The key to 1099s is in the vendor file. In version 15.3 or earlier, you identify a vendor as being a certain type of box on the 1099, and then as you accumulate invoices for that vendor, when you go to print those 1099 reports, they will print for the vendors for which you have indicated which box 1099 information goes on. Now, I say that because in version 16, it used to be that if you had a vendor for which some payments qualified for 1099 reporting and some did not, you had to create two vendors, one that had the 1099 box selected and one that didn't, and then you would, when you went to print the report or create the disk file, it would only do it for the ones invoices that were entered against the client or the vendor for whom you had set it up to report 1099 information. This is kind of a teaser for version 16 and for what we're going to go through next month in the Watercooler, which is a preview to version 16. You now have the ability in the new version on an invoice-by-invoice basis, it would show up here on the invoice screen, to indicate whether or not that particular invoice is going to be subject to 1099 reporting. So that way you can set up one vendor and have one set of vendor totals, and you can look at the vendor as a single entity and yet report 1099 information only on a subset of that vendor's invoices. And then really it's pretty simple. Once you have set up correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mary Jo, but you can go in right now and say these vendors qualify for these boxes for reporting on 1099, and then go ahead and print them. You don't have to have done that before you created the invoices. So
no,
you can
the other thing that you
go ahead.
The other thing, real quick, on the vendor, Paul, when you're in the vendor and those boxes, a lot of people ask, what's box 1, what's box 5, what's box 7, which one, what's what? There's a real quick, if you just click on the yellow question mark, it will give you what they are.
Oh, good point.
So
yeah.
if you're in that screen and you click on the yellow question mark for the help, it will take you into a screen that will tell you what is box, box 5 is rent or whatever it is, I don't know, but it'll give you that list so you know what to choose and how to do it. And I don't know if we have help working on here or not, Paul, but that's where it is.
My computer's just being slow. We're going to blame Todd Nichols from Battle Creek, Michigan, who's asking our question.
Who has his hand raised.
Probably slowing everything down.
But right here on this screen, you can just go down to the 1099 info, click on it, and that will give you a list of what box 1, and what they mean. So you've got it, the definition.
And then as long as you've got those forms that are the right format, which I believe you can get them from Nelco, I'm sure, is probably why STI was mailing people, but I'm sure that just about any 1099 form, if it will run through your printer, will work in the software. So be careful. Check that out first. But as long as you've got those forms, all you do is feed them through your printer while you're running the print routine, and you're ready to go. Now, Todd has been...
I'm going to unmute Paul, or I'm sorry, Todd, for you, Paul, so you can hear it. Go ahead,
there, Todd?
You read the question.
Huh?
Hi. When at year end, when we're going into 2011, when can we start adding 2011 payments or receipts that come in? We haven't closed from our account in 2010 yet.
Well,
as soon as you advance the month.
Yeah, and which advances the year. Here's the problem. Yeah. People don't like to close the year until the accountant says to close the year. In our system, closing the month and even the year, as long as you've done these other things as far as, backing up your data and creating a GL client, closing the year doesn't mean that you can't post prior year entries. So you don't have to wait for your accountant to get you some sort of adjusting entries to post them. Same thing with closing the month. We really wish, as a group, the dealers, STI dealers tend to wish more often than not, that they would get rid of that altogether. Now, programmatically, it's difficult. Changing it to where you don't have to close the month and don't have to close the year, even though it seems simple, is something that is going to be difficult for them to do, and they will do it someday. But since, gosh, version 10, version 9, I don't even know when they changed this. It used to be that if you closed the month or closed the year, you couldn't make a prior month's entry or you couldn't make a prior year's entry. That's not true anymore. So you do want to make sure with year end that you don't just close the year. You want to make sure you do a couple things first, print a couple reports, do your 1099s, you do a few things. But once you're ready, you can close the year without having heard from your accountant yet, and you can still go back in and make those prior year entries. So you're right. And Todd, your voice has changed incredibly. I don't know what's happened.
Debbie.
Debbie, you don't have to worry about closing the year to get those receipts in. Well, yes, you do, but you don't have to wait for your accountant anymore. You do need to, back up the archive or create the archive client, back up the data, do things like that. But then go ahead and close the year, and then wait the 2 months that your accountant's going to make you wait before you get those adjusting entries, knowing that you can go back and make those prior year entries. Does that answer that?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
It's the same thing I run into every month when I go to put payments in. I always have forgotten to close the month, and it tells me, and I don't hesitate, even though I may not get to doing our actual month-end accounting, all the different things I do for weeks. I still go ahead and just advance the current month, and then I can put the payment in. Okay, I'm going to mute you up again. How many people are in the room up there?
3. There's 3 of us.
3, okay. And do you have clients in the office? Can you make a lot of noise for us before we unmute you?
We could if we wanted to.
Yeah, okay. Fine, we're going to mute you. Okay. It's all yours, Mary Jo.
Okay, so that's pretty much in accounts payable, what you need to do. And we've shown you a couple things there with your 1099s. Now the last one that I was going to show you real quick is the trust accounting module. And again, it's just very basic. We're going to go do our data file integrity check. You've already backed up your whole system files. You're going to also want to do your bank reconciliation and trust. So you're going to want to make sure that's finished. Print your check register either by check number or by trust account, whichever one that you do. There's a couple reports here that you can print off. Or you can do it by payee. There's the 3 different ways, or do all 3. You can print your voided checklist in trust as well. If you're integrating with AP, sometimes you are doing 1099s in trust as well, and there is a program that you can do that you can merge the 1099 information, and you can then print the 1099s all in one form. So that is possible in trust, and occasionally we have firms that do use that, where you might have a trust account for something and you have to merge it over with an AP 1099. You can do that here. And again, just make sure that everything is backed up and you've run your data file integrity check when you're done. And that's pretty much it in trust. There's not I like to, at the end of the year, do my client trust ledger and my trust account list, just make sure all my balances are correct. If you've been reconciling in the system, you should be okay. And that's all I have. These reports are going to be available. Paul will show you where they are, and it's got step-by-step what I went through, and then it also goes into a little more detail on some, because a lot of times we have clients that ask questions, well, if I do this, what happens, or well, how does that affect this? And it goes into a little more detail in each of those articles. So
basically, they're in the knowledge base, and we can see them here. There's one for each program. There is not one for Practice Master, because other than data file integrity check and that's about it, and you don't even have to do that. And then there's also one, I'll include a link to the one about how to archive your GL client. It's an article entitled All About GLS Clients, but one of the subjects is archiving the GLS client. So I will send links to all 5 of these articles when I send the link to the recorded version of the Watercooler, so that you can refer to them. Any more questions? Lawyer jokes? Okay.
Paul, did you want to make a note that we're going to move? Are we moving up our
Oh, yes, thank you.
Our Learn Day next month.
I said at the very beginning, I said, and it's the second to last Tuesday, and then I realized, no, that's in December. In December, we have moved our Watercooler, our virtual user group meeting, up a week so that it doesn't fall in the week of week after Christmas, week before New Year's, because A, that's a very busy time for a lot of you people, and B, some people do get certain bits of that time off. So we've moved it up. It's going to be the Tuesday before Christmas instead of the Tuesday after Christmas. So we will see everybody then. It is still raining outside, so it must still be November. But tomorrow is December, and I guess that means it's going to start snowing. So everybody have a good afternoon, and we'll see you in I think it's just 3 weeks when we have our December virtual user group meeting. Bye-bye.